Should this poem rhyme or not rhyme?
Rhyme.
What rhyme?
Rhyme. I think it should rhyme.
Rhyme.
No rhyme.
Okay, what we'll do is we won't have like a rhyme every line or a rhyme every 2 lines. We'll just throw in a rhyme where we think it's appropriate. Me, I just thought of frozen lips and frostbite. We can rhyme with fun here if you want.
It was so hot.
I'm sorry?
It was so hot.
It was so white? Oh, to describe the snow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Me, actually I'll change the order of it. When I thought of the snow, so innocent and white, I just thought of frozen lips and frostbite. It's a okay, the syllables are slightly off, but I just thought of frozen lips and frostbite. Okay, they call it the snowpocalypse. It was so cold it froze my lips. Others called it epic, others called it fun. Me, when I thought of the snow, so innocent and white, I just thought of frozen lips and frostbite. Okay, so it's kind of contrasting how other people feel compared to how this person feels, because they obviously had a painful experience. What else could we say? So let's look back at our list of words. And this isn't like a word sheet that we have to check off. We could just, pick one or two. Which word do you think we should use to continue our poem?
Dangerous.
Dangerous, okay. I see little kids playing on the feet of snow. And when I say I see little kids playing on the feet of snow, it actually kind of works in two ways. It's like feet, almost like the body part, and then feet, because there's feet of snow. But I see little kids playing on the feet of snow. I don't know, or wait, let's see. Basically, what the narrator is saying is, I see little kids playing on the feet of snow, and I'm not sure if they quite understand how dangerous it is. Seemingly perfect. I'm not sure they know. It's dangerous too. Okay, I see little kids playing on the feet of snow, seemingly perfect. I'm not sure they know. It's dangerous too. So sort of a foreboding note. And how is when you read this, how do you think the narrator is overall reflecting on the snow? Positive, negative?
Negative.
Negative, very negative. And another thing that it's reflecting on is that the narrator feels a little bit alone in thinking that, because others called it epic, others called it fun. Little kids playing on the feet of snow. So in a way, it's that the narrator, she's kind of, well, I had this experience, I don't like it, everyone else loves it, but I really can't do that. So, and another thing that you might notice in this poem is that probably none of us have had a first-hand, maybe some you have, but I definitely have not ever had a first-hand experience with frostbite. We've probably all gone outside at some point or another in some cold place and gotten our face very red or something like that, but probably not too many of us have gotten, like, I don't know, blackened fingers because of how cold it is. But poets can play with reflections. You can distort a reflection, you can exaggerate. What is it when you exaggerate in a poem? What are you doing?
It's bigger.
Making it bigger? Yeah, you're throwing it out of proportions. It's often to make it funny or to make it more interesting, better for your purposes. You could make it funnier or more dramatic that way. And also, it's an easier, when you think about it, it's a little bit easier to reflect on something that you stretched out maybe than to reflect on something very, very small. So even, and what I mean by this is, let's say you're reflecting on the color of a flower. the color of a flower is not like a huge issue like the war in Afghanistan or something like that. It's a very small thing. And so when you zoom into it by writing a poem about it, then it makes it easier. So what I mean is you can take small things and zoom into them. You can kind of distort that reflection. For instance, you might not think that writing about gardening is super interesting. I wrote this poem called Backyard Battle to try to change that somewhat. A pair of grubby hands in creep, a pair of dirt-flecked eyes in sleep, a pair of pants in need of change, a muddy, grubby, dark melange. The ivy lurks about the wall, the monarchs watch the berries crawl, the spark of war among the grass, between the humans, not the last. The gloves of cloth shall reach to pull, lo, behold the ancient skull. With trusty shovel, spade, and knife, will rid this garden of its strife. It's a really dramatic version of what you do when you're outside reading, essentially. It's looking at this backyard as sort of a battleground of where you're fighting against the grass that's threatening to make its way over here, and you're fighting against the weeds and the ivy, all these different invasive plants. And I know that this is somewhat comes from my own experience because my dad is very vehement about clearing out our backyard when he has the time. And there's a specific noxious weed called herb robber that he's like out against. So you can take something, and probably all of you have parents with their quirks about what they do, what they're whether they're after a group of wasps that's living in your roof or whatever's going on, whatever your parents sort of obsess about. I know that my dad also goes after all the moths with a vacuum cleaner, like he vacuums them up. So yeah, I could write a poem about that. It's very small, but reflecting on this, using it actually as a surface or reflection about conflict and the idea of conflict taking place even when you think about reading, that's really not a conflict, but making it and sort of turning it into one. So you can kind of exaggerate and you can turn something that doesn't seem like a conflict into a conflict in order to reflect on it. You can magnify a reflection, make it bigger. So what are some ways that we could, for instance, let's say with the snow, how could we make that bigger or make it smaller or distort it? What are some ways we could play around with it? Well, for one thing, we could change our point of view. Our point of view is that of a person who's been affected by the snowstorm, but imagine having the point of view of the snowstorm. You might take something, an inanimate natural disaster like a snowstorm, and obviously you can't be a snowstorm. The snowstorm doesn't have, as far as we know, some sort of like conscious mind, but you can, in poetry, you can take a lot of liberties. If you've ever read poems that are from the point of view of animals, or read poems that are from the point of view of all kinds of things that don't talk in our language anyway, then you could take something like a snowstorm and talk from its point of view. So an interesting thing to think about. Here are some more writing ideas. You can reflect by asking questions. What are some questions that you might ask before you write a reflective poem? What are questions you have in life? What are questions you have about big topics, small topics? What's something you don't know? Well, why don't you all... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How is this affecting the people in the United States?
I'm sorry?
How is this affecting people in the U.S.?
How is this affecting people in the U.S.? Very good. Yeah, you could reflect by asking, how is this affecting people? For instance, taking a snowstorm, and instead of just writing basically about what's going on, what it looks like, you would think, how is this affecting people? How do people feel? How do I feel? Asking questions like that, getting more to the heart of the issue. You could ask questions about different kinds of current events, like for instance, the dead birds in Arkansas, huge mystery, and no one could really figure out what was going on. So you could ask, what happened? Why doesn't anybody know? What do I think happened? How do I feel about it? So again, you could ask some of those same questions. Now, I want everyone to write down on their piece of paper at least one thing that they don't know and one question they might have about that issue. So for instance, I read to you my poem, The Long Stare. I might write, I don't know what will happen to Earth, what will happen to humans when we're gone. And then I might write a question, what will the Earth look like? Something like that. So write down a topic and write down a question based on that topic. So the topic should be something you really don't know, that you have a lot of questions about, and then your reflection, you would ask a question. And then raise your hand as soon as you've finished writing down your idea. Okay, I see a raised hand. Anyone else done? Raise your hand. And you can put your hand down as long as I've seen it. So basically I've seen 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. Let's get one more person. Oh, okay, great, perfect. So now raise your hand to share whatever you've written. Why is it that hands go down like that? Come on, keep them up. Okay, would anyone like to just read out what they've written?
I don't know what is at the end of the universe. What is at the end of the universe?
Okay, great. I don't know what's at the end of the universe. What is at the end of the universe? What does it look like? What would it sound like? You can use a sentence. Yeah, very good. You can reflect by asking questions. So, and that's a great one. What else?
What will happen in the future?
What will happen in the future? Oh, sorry.
Will animals take over?
Will animals take over? Excellent question, and I think that would make a really good, that would be a great one to explore for a poem too, because there's a lot of ways to use language and different interesting things, as well as the fact that it's not a topic that's very often explored, so good one. And let's get one more.
The aliens exist.
I'm sorry?
Do aliens exist?
Do aliens exist? Okay, great. So yeah, we have a range of questions here. We have a lot. I'm sure a lot of you probably came up with similar ones. What will happen in the future? What will happen? Will animals take over? Do aliens exist? What will the universe look like? So yeah, these are questions that you can write poetry about, and it can be serious poetry, like the one we wrote about when I was little. I thought people knew everything. I was a little bit sad. I was a little bit frustrated. Or you can write a kind of humorous one about like everyone thinks that snow is so great, but I got frostbite. So you can, oh, it's happened again. You can have all kinds of different questions and poems that you could write about. Here are some more writing ideas. Oh, oops. Actually, this is a reflective poem that I wrote. Sort of about, how did everything come about? What majesty makes every day? Who commands the bird's song? What malevolence makes all the dust and every footpath long? What serenity makes the lake sparkling demure? What mischief disturbs its peace with eternal furor? What cleverness has shaped us to swim in shining sea? Well, I know one thing for sure. It wasn't you or me. And so this one is, again, you might notice if you read some of my poems, especially the reflective ones, is that there's a lot of contrast going on. As in, who commands the bird song? So a bird singing, that seems nice, it's sort of a positive image, but then all the dust and every path is too long, it's kind of a negative image. Sparkling, demure lakes versus eternal fear, or like basically calmness versus mischief and non-peaceful environment. So what cleverness has shaped us to swim in shining sea? Well, I know one thing for sure, it wasn't you or me. Then ending. Also kind of on that contrasting note, saying, definitely wasn't us who were responsible. So writing a poem either with contrast, that's serious, that's funny. You can choose the topic that best suits your style. Whether it's a grand world event or something tiny and interesting like a mouse or the color of a flower or rain sliding on a window pane. And any of those topics provide great bouncing off points for reflective poetry. You can take something out of your own life that seems boring, like a semester test or something, and take that and make it and reflect on it, make your feelings heard. To make your poem more interesting, you could look at the same subject from different points of view, as we talked about with the snowstorm. Look at your topic from a new angle and have fun exploring on these angles, exploring that point of view. And are there any ideas that you have as far as reflective poetry? Some last things that you'd like to say before you wrap up the session? Okay, well, before you leave the room, I want each one of you to think of an idea for a reflective poem. As you've already written down that question, now you just want to fine-tune that a little bit. Think about an idea, think about your answer to that question. And so you don't have to share it right now, but just think about that, keep it in your mind, and I hope to see some of you writing reflective poetry in the future. Are there any questions that I can answer about reflective poetry, about writing?
Do you enjoy writing poetry?
Do I enjoy writing poetry? Yes, definitely. I love doing it, and if I didn't, I would be kind of stupid to write a lot of it. Yeah, you can probably tell that I like writing poetry from the amount that I write, like in Dancing Fingers. That this isn't all the poetry I've written. I've written quite a bit more than that, but those are some of the better ones. And so yeah, I love writing poetry. I write it on a very often. And even for those of you, actually, I should amend what I said earlier about if I didn't like it, I'd be sort of stupid to write all the time. Even if you think I don't like poetry, it's boring, it's so Shakespearean and academic sounding, really a lot of times you have these preconceived notions of poetry as being A, B kind of rhyme scheme. And I actually love A, B, and that's how I write most of the time, but there are all kinds of poetry. There's kinds of poetry with no capital letters and that experiment with shapes and stuff like that. There's kinds of poetry that where every single word is rhymed practically. There's kinds of poetry that turn into rap songs and lyrics, and so yeah, there's really all kinds of poetry, and I really encourage all of you, even those of you who say poetry is boring, to experiment with different types. And reflective poetry is not like a structure of poetry. It's a group of poems where the author is reflecting on something. So my little rant in response to that question. Is there one more question? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry?
What inspired you about so many poems?
What is hard to you about writing poetry?
What inspired you?
Oh, what inspires you to write poetry? Okay. A lot of things inspire me to write poetry. One of the big ones is looking at current events, looking at the news, as I mentioned. Another one is definitely the things that I see around me, the events that I take part in, different authors. I love to read poetry as well, and I think that gives me a lot of good ideas as well. And definitely, as far as inspiration goes for my structure and how I write the poems, reading classic works helps a lot, because you'll see in my poems, sometimes if I've been reading a certain author, it really mirrors that, and it's definitely a good way to learn. So quite a lot inspires me. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking part in the reflective poetry. I know that it's not always easy to raise your hand, but it's definitely helpful when you do. So thank you very much for coming through on the Snowpocalypse poem, and I hope you all have a great day. Thanks.